The morning sun cast long shadows across the naval training base as recruits marched in perfect formation. Among them walked Sarah Chen, her dark hair pulled back in regulation style, her steps matching the rhythm of boots hitting concrete. She kept her eyes forward, ignoring the whispers and sideways glances from her fellow cadets. "Look at her trying to fit in," muttered Jake Morrison, a tall recruit with broad shoulders who had quickly established himself as the unofficial leader of their training group. "Thinks she can handle what we do." Sarah heard every word but showed no reaction. She had learned long ago that responding to such comments only made things worse. Instead, she focused on the obstacle course ahead, mentally preparing herself for another day of proving she belonged here. The naval training facility stretched for miles, with barracks, training grounds, and specialized equipment designed to push recruits to their absolute limits. Sarah had dreamed of this moment since childhood, watching her father return from deployments with stories of honor, duty, and serving something greater than oneself. Now, at 22, she was finally here, ready to prove herself worthy of wearing the uniform. Commander Williams stood at the center of the training ground, his weathered face showing decades of military experience. His voice boomed across the field as recruits gathered around him in neat rows. "Today, we test your endurance, your strength, and your ability to work as a team," he announced. "The obstacle course you see before you has broken stronger people than you. Some of you will fail. Some of you will quit. But those who succeed will take one step closer to earning the right to serve your country." Sarah studied the course carefully. It included rope climbing, wall scaling, crawling through mud under barbed wire, and a final water challenge that required swimming 50 meters in full gear. She had trained for this her entire life, but she knew that physical preparation was only part of the battle. "Chen," Commander Williams called out. "You're in Group 3 with Morrison, Rodriguez, and Patterson." Jake Morrison's face twisted into a satisfied smirk. David Rodriguez, a quiet but strong recruit from Texas, nodded politely at Sarah. Mike Patterson, who rarely spoke but seemed to follow Jake's lead in everything, just stared at her, with obvious skepticism. "Great," Jake said loud enough for Sarah to hear. "Now we'll have dead weight slowing us down." Sarah approached the group, her chin up and shoulders square. "I won't slow anyone down," she said calmly. Jake laughed, and several other recruits joined in. "We'll see about that, sweetheart. This isn't some civilian gym class." The first obstacle was a 15-foot rope climb. Recruits had to ring a bell at the top and slide down safely. Jake went first, his muscled arms pulling him up with practiced ease. He reached the top quickly, rang the bell with obvious pride, and slid down to cheers from other cadets. Rodriguez went next, climbing steadily and efficiently. His technique was smooth, and he completed the challenge without difficulty. Patterson struggled more but eventually made it to the top, his face red with effort by the time he rang the bell. Then it was Sarah's turn. She approached the rope, aware that dozens of eyes were watching her every move. Some recruits had gathered around to see if the woman would fail at the first obstacle. "Come on, Chen," Jake called out mockingly. "We don't have all day." Sarah gripped the rope, positioned her feet correctly, and began to climb. Her movements were fluid and controlled, each pull calculated and efficient. She had spent countless hours practicing this exact technique, and her body moved with muscle memory developed through years of preparation. Halfway up, she heard Jake's voice change slightly. "Not bad," he admitted grudgingly. She reached the top faster than Patterson and rang the bell with authority. The slide down was controlled and professional. When her feet hit the ground, she looked directly at Jake. "Next obstacle?" she asked simply. The wall climb came next. 12 feet of vertical wood with small handholds scattered across its surface. This obstacle eliminated many recruits every year, requiring both upper body strength and problem-solving skills to find the best route to the top. Jake attacked the wall aggressively, using brute force to pull himself up. His approach worked, but he was breathing hard when he reached the summit. Rodriguez took a more methodical approach, planning his route before starting and conserving energy throughout the climb. Patterson struggled again, slipping twice before finally making it over. His hands were scraped and bleeding by the time he dropped down on the other side. Sarah studied the wall for 30 seconds before beginning her ascent. She had identified the most efficient path and moved with precision from one handhold to the next. Her climbing looked almost effortless, each movement flowing naturally into the next. How did she make that look so easy? Rodriguez wondered aloud. Jake said nothing, but his expression had shifted from mockery to curiosity. The crawling section tested mental toughness as much as physical ability. Recruits had to belly crawl for 50 yards under strands of barbed wire, with muddy water soaking through their uniforms. The wire was positioned low enough that anyone who raised their head too high would get scraped. This obstacle was where many female recruits struggled, not because of physical limitations but because of the psychological challenge of dragging themselves through mud while sharp metal hung inches above their backs. Jake plunged into the mud without hesitation, his competitive nature driving him forward. He moved fast but caught his uniform on the wire twice, tearing the fabric. Rodriguez went slower but smoother, keeping his profile low and steady throughout the crawl. Patterson had the most difficulty, panicking slightly when his shirt got caught. He had to stop and carefully free himself, losing valuable time and composure. Sarah approached the mud with calm determination. She had practiced this obstacle hundreds of times in her own training, often making it more difficult by adding weight or reducing the clearance even further. She moved through the course like water, her body staying perfectly aligned with the ground. Other recruits stopped their own training to watch. Her technique was flawless, her speed impressive, and she emerged from the other end, completely focused and ready for the next challenge. Okay, that was actually pretty good, Jake admitted to Rodriguez quietly. The final obstacle was the water challenge. Recruits had to swim 50 meters in full gear, including boots and uniform, then tread water for 2 minutes before swimming back. This was where preparation met reality, and where many dreams of military service ended. Jake entered the water confidently but soon realized that swimming in full gear was vastly different from his high school swimming experience. His waterlogged clothes dragged at his limbs, and his boots felt like anchors. He completed the challenge but was exhausted and had swallowed considerable amounts of water. Rodriguez, despite his strength on land, struggled significantly in the water. He managed to complete the swimming portion but barely survived the treading water requirement. His face was pale when he finally emerged. Patterson didn't even attempt the challenge after seeing how difficult it was for the others. He told Commander Williams he needed more training and would try again next week. Sarah entered the water with the same calm confidence she had shown throughout the course. But something was different now. Her movements in the water weren't just competent. They were masterful. She cut through the water with efficiency that spoke of countless hours of specialized training. She completed the 50-meter swim so quickly that Commander Williams checked his stopwatch twice. During the treading water portion, she remained perfectly stable, her breathing controlled, and her position in the water optimal. The return swim was equally impressive. When she emerged from the water, she wasn't even breathing hard. Jake stared at her, confusion and growing respect mixing in his expression. "Where did you learn to swim like that?" Sarah wrung water from her hair and looked at him steadily. "I've been preparing for this my whole life." Commander Williams approached their group, his notebook in hand. "Morrison, good effort but work on your water technique. Rodriguez, excellent determination. Patterson, report for additional training tomorrow." He turned to Sarah, his expression unreadable. "Chen, report to my office after evening chow." As the group walked back toward the barracks, Jake fell into step beside Sarah. His earlier hostility had been replaced by curiosity and something approaching respect. "Look, I may have been wrong about you," he said. "You've got skills, but this is just the beginning. Training gets a lot harder from here." Sarah nodded. "I understand." "Do you?" Jake pressed. "Because some of the stuff we're going to do, it's not just about physical ability. We're training for real combat situations. Life and death stuff." "I know exactly what we're training for," Sarah replied quietly. That evening, Sarah knocked on Commander Williams' office door at precisely 1,800 hours. His office was Spartanly decorated with military commendations, photographs from various deployments, and a bookshelf filled with tactical manuals and military history. "Sit down, Chen," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Sarah sat at attention, her hands folded in her lap. Commander Williams studied her for a long moment. "Your performance today was exceptional. Not just good for a woman. Exceptional, period. That kind of water proficiency doesn't come from civilian training." Sarah remained silent, waiting for him to continue. "I've been doing this for 23 years. Chen, I've trained thousands of recruits. Your file says you're a college graduate with no prior military experience. But what I saw today suggests otherwise." "Sir, my file is accurate," Sarah replied carefully. "Is it?" Williams leaned back in his chair. "Because that swimming technique, that obstacle course performance, that's not beginner work. That's advanced training." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "I've always been athletic, sir. I prepared extensively before coming here." Williams opened her file and flipped through several pages. "Says here you graduated from Stanford with a degree in engineering. Good grades. No military background. Standard civilian references." He closed the file and looked at her again. "But files don't always tell the whole story. Do they?" "Chen," Sarah remained silent. "I'm going to be watching you very carefully," Williams said finally. "Outstanding performance is good, but mysterious backgrounds make me nervous. In this business, we need to know exactly who we're working with." "Understood, sir." Dismissed. Sarah stood, saluted, and left the office. As she walked back toward the barracks, she was unaware that Jake Morrison was standing in the shadows near the administrative building, having overheard the entire conversation. That night in the barracks, the atmosphere was different. Word had spread about Sarah's performance on the obstacle course, and the casual dismissal she had faced earlier was replaced by cautious interest. "Seriously, where did you learn to swim like that?" Rodriguez asked, as recruits prepared for lights out. "My father taught me," Sarah replied, which was true as far as it went. Jake sat on his bunk, still processing what he had witnessed and overheard. "Your dad was military?" "Yes." "What branch?" Sarah hesitated for just a moment. "Navy." "What did he do in the Navy?" Another pause. "Special operations." The barracks fell silent. Special operations meant elite training, classified missions, and capabilities far beyond standard military service. It also meant that Sarah had likely been raised with access to training and knowledge that other recruits could only dream of. "That explains a lot," Jake said quietly. As lights went out and the barracks settled into the quiet rhythm of sleeping soldiers, Sarah stared at the ceiling, knowing that her performance had been too good, too polished to maintain her cover much longer. She had worked so hard to appear average, to blend in. But when the obstacles had presented themselves, her training had taken over instinctively. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and she would have to decide how much of her true capabilities to reveal. The mission was too important to compromise, but her cover story was already beginning to crack under scrutiny. In the darkness, she made a decision that would change everything. She would continue to excel but try to make it look like rapid improvement rather than pre-existing expertise. She would have to trust that her carefully constructed background would hold up under investigation. What she didn't know was that Commander Williams was already making phone calls, and that Jake Morrison was beginning to piece together clues that would lead him to a shocking discovery about who Sarah Chen really was and why she was really at the Naval Training Facility. The real test was just beginning. 3 weeks had passed since Sarah's arrival at the Naval Training Facility, and her performance continued to be nothing short of extraordinary. Every test, every challenge, every training exercise revealed new levels of skill that shouldn't exist in a civilian recruit. Jake Morrison had become obsessed with figuring out who Sarah Chen really was. What had started as typical military hazing had evolved into genuine curiosity, then suspicion, and now something approaching investigation. He spent his free time watching her, noting every perfect technique, every instinctive reaction that suggested advanced training. "She's not who she says she is," Jake confided to Rodriguez, as they cleaned their weapons after a particularly challenging firearms training session. "Did you see how she handled that rifle today?" Rodriguez nodded thoughtfully. She field stripped it faster than our instructor. And her shooting groupings were all center mass, every single time. Exactly. That's not beginner stuff. That's expert-level marksmanship. Earlier that day, the recruits had been taken to the firing range for their first live ammunition training. Most new soldiers struggled with weapon basics, learning to control recoil and manage their breathing. Sarah had picked up the rifle like she had been born holding one. Her stance was textbook perfect, her grip exactly right, her breathing pattern optimal. When she fired, each shot found its target with mechanical precision. The shooting instructor, Staff Sergeant Martinez, had stopped the exercise to examine her targets. "Chen, where did you learn to shoot?" he had asked. "My father taught me basic marksmanship, sir," Sarah had replied, sticking to her prepared story. "Basic marksmanship?" Martinez had held up her target, showing a tight grouping of shots that would have been impressive for a veteran marksman. "This is professional-level accuracy." Sarah had simply shrugged. "I guess I'm a quick learner, sir." But Jake had noticed something else during the weapons training. When Sarah thought no one was looking, she had instinctively checked corners, scanned for threats, and positioned herself with her back to walls. These were tactical behaviors drilled into people through extensive combat training, not habits developed by college students. That evening, Jake made a decision that would change everything. Instead of speculating further, he would take direct action to uncover the truth about Sarah Chen. The base's administrative building was mostly empty after hours, secured but not heavily guarded. Jake had developed a reputation as a reliable recruit, someone who followed rules and earned trust. This reputation gave him access to areas that other cadets might not be able to enter. Using his clearance for routine administrative tasks, Jake accessed the personnel computer system. He wasn't a computer expert, but he knew enough about basic database searches to begin investigating Sarah's background. Her official file confirmed everything she had told them. Stanford University engineering graduate. No prior military service. Civilian references from professors and employers. But Jake had learned enough about military intelligence during his brief time at the base to know that the most important information was often hidden behind security classifications. He started cross-referencing her name with military databases, looking for any connections that might explain her extraordinary abilities. For an hour, he found nothing unusual. Then he tried searching for her father's military record. The search results made him sit back in surprise. Chief Petty Officer David Chen, United States Navy. 30-year career with multiple commendations for valor. Special Operations Command. Maritime Special Operations. Multiple classified deployments. Jake leaned closer to the screen. Maritime Special Operations meant Naval Special Warfare. That meant SEALs or similar elite units. If Sarah's father was Special Forces, it would explain some of her abilities, but not all of them. Children of military personnel didn't automatically inherit expert-level skills. He continued reading. David Chen had been awarded the Silver Star for actions during a classified operation. He had served multiple tours in dangerous locations around the world. His final assignment before retirement had been as an instructor at Naval Special Warfare training facilities. Then Jake found something that made his blood run cold. David Chen had died 2 years ago in a training accident at Naval Special Warfare Command. The circumstances were classified, but the location was listed as Naval Special Warfare Group 1, which meant SEAL training. Jake sat back, his mind racing. Sarah's father hadn't just been Special Forces. He had been a SEAL instructor who died at a SEAL training facility. That raised questions about why Sarah was going through basic recruit training instead of already being in the Navy, and why her father's death was classified. He printed out the key information and carefully covered his tracks in the computer system. As he prepared to leave the administrative building, Jake heard footsteps in the corridor. He quickly shut down the computer and grabbed some routine paperwork to justify his presence. Commander Williams rounded the corner, his expression surprised to see a recruit in the building so late. "Morrison, what are you doing here?" "Completing my duty roster reports, sir. I wanted to get them done before tomorrow's training." Williams studied him carefully. "That's very conscientious of you. Make sure you secure everything before you leave." "Yes, sir." As Williams continued down the corridor, Jake realized he wasn't the only one conducting after-hours investigations. The commander's presence in the administrative building at this hour suggested that official inquiries were also underway. The next morning brought advanced combat training. The recruits were divided into teams for simulated combat exercises using laser tag equipment and paintball markers. The scenarios were designed to test tactical thinking, teamwork, and performance under pressure. Jake's team included Sarah, Rodriguez, and two other recruits named Thompson and Walsh. Their mission was to secure a building while defending against opposing forces. It was the kind of exercise that usually resulted in chaos, confusion, and plenty of mistakes from inexperienced recruits. Sarah immediately took charge of tactical planning. Thompson and Walsh, you take the south entrance. Rodriguez, cover the east side. Morrison, you're with me on the main assault. Wait, Jake said, surprised by her sudden leadership. Who put you in charge? Do you have a better plan? Sarah asked calmly, pulling out a hand-drawn map of the building with defensive positions marked. Jake stared at the map. It was professionally detailed, showing sightlines, cover positions, and tactical advantages he wouldn't have noticed. This wasn't the work of a civilian recruit. This was military-grade tactical planning. Where did this come from? I sketched it while the instructors were explaining the mission, Sarah replied. We need to move fast before the opposing team gets set up. The exercise began, and Jake watched in amazement as Sarah's plan unfolded flawlessly. She moved through the building like a professional soldier, using hand signals he recognized from advanced military training manuals. Her weapon handling was precise, her positioning perfect, and her tactical awareness extraordinary. When they encountered the opposing team, Sarah's responses were immediate and devastating. She anticipated their movements, flanked their positions, and eliminated threats with an efficiency that stunned both her teammates and the exercise observers. Within 15 minutes, Jake's team had secured the building with minimal casualties. The opposing team, made up of recruits who had been training for months longer, had been systematically outmaneuvered by Sarah's tactical expertise. Outstanding performance, team, announced the exercise instructor. Chen, your tactical leadership was exemplary. Where did you learn squad-level tactics? Sarah hesitated for just a moment. I read military strategy books in college, sir. I've always been interested in tactical problems. Jake knew she was lying. What he had witnessed wasn't theoretical knowledge from textbooks. It was practical experience gained through real training and possibly real combat. After the exercise, Jake pulled Sarah aside. We need to talk, he said seriously. About what? About who you really are? Sarah studied his face, recognizing that something fundamental had changed. I don't know what you mean. Your father was David Chen, Chief Petty Officer, Naval Special Warfare Command. He died 2 years ago in a training accident that's still classified. Sarah went completely still. Her carefully maintained cover expression slipped for just a moment, revealing something much harder and more dangerous underneath. How do you know that? Because I looked it up. Because your performance here doesn't match your story. Because every single thing you do screams advanced military training. They stood facing each other in the equipment shed, the weight of Jake's discovery hanging between them. What do you want? Sarah asked quietly. I want the truth. Who are you? Why are you really here? Sarah looked around to ensure they were alone, then made a decision that would change both of their lives. If I tell you, there's no going back. You'll be involved in something bigger than basic training, bigger than anything you've imagined. Jake nodded. I'm listening. My father didn't die in a training accident. He was killed during a classified operation that went wrong. The Navy believes there's a security leak in Special Operations Command, someone passing information to hostile forces. Jake felt the world shift around him. You're here to find the leak. I'm here because I'm the only person qualified to investigate without raising suspicions. I have the skills, the motivation, and the background to get close to potential suspects. You're not really a recruit. Sarah shook her head. I'm Lieutenant Sarah Chen, Naval Intelligence. I graduated from the Naval Academy 5 years ago and completed SEAL training 18 months ago. I was recruited by Naval Intelligence after my father's death. Jake stared at her. everything suddenly making sense. You're a Navy SEAL. Yes. And you've been pretending to be a civilian recruit to investigate security leaks. The mission is classified beyond your clearance level, but yes. Jake sat down heavily on a equipment crate. This is insane. You're a real SEAL. Investigating real threats. And I've been treating you like a woman who doesn't belong here, Sarah finished. Which was exactly the cover I needed. Does Commander Williams know? Commander Williams is one of the people under investigation. That revelation hit Jake like a physical blow. Williams was their training commander, a respected veteran with decades of service. The idea that he might be passing classified information to enemies seemed impossible. You think Williams killed your father? I don't know yet. But someone with high-level access compromised the operation that got my father killed. Williams has the right access, the right position, and he's been asking too many questions about my background. Jake stood up, his sense of duty warring with his confusion. What do you need from me? Nothing. You should forget this conversation happened and continue your training normally. That's not going to happen, Jake said firmly. If there's a traitor here, if your father was killed because of it, then I want to help. Sarah studied him carefully. This isn't a game, Morrison. If my investigation is blown, people will die. If the leak isn't found, more operations will be compromised. Then we better not blow it. Over the next hour, Sarah explained the basics of her mission. A series of special operations missions had failed over the past year, always because enemy forces seemed to know exactly when and where American forces would be deployed. The intelligence suggested that someone with access to operational planning was passing information to hostile groups. Sarah's father had been investigating the same security breach when his team was ambushed during what should have been a routine training exercise. The ambush was too well coordinated to be accidental, and the attackers had known details that were only available to a small number of high-ranking personnel. So you volunteered to go undercover to find your father's killer, Jake said. I was recruited because I have the skills to blend in and the motivation to see this through. What happens when you find the leak? Sarah's expression grew cold. That's not your concern. Jake realized he was now part of something much more dangerous and important than he had ever imagined. His decision to investigate Sarah Chen had pulled him into a world of espionage, betrayal, and potentially lethal consequences. What he didn't know was that their conversation had been overheard by someone who had been watching Sarah just as carefully as Jake had been, someone who now realized that the investigation was much closer to success than anyone suspected. The real danger was just beginning. 2 days after Jake learned Sarah's true identity, everything began to unravel. The carefully constructed investigation that had taken months to plan was about to explode into open conflict, and Sarah Chen found herself fighting not just for her mission, but for her life. It started with a routine night training exercise. The recruits were scheduled for a midnight navigation course through the woods surrounding the base. Each team would be given coordinates and expected to reach checkpoints using only compass and map skills. It was designed to test their ability to work together under stress and in difficult conditions. Sarah knew something was wrong the moment Commander Williams announced the exercise. Night navigation wasn't normally scheduled until much later in basic training, and the woods chosen for the exercise were unusually remote from the main base. Her instincts, honed through years of special operations training, were screaming warnings. Morrison, Chen, Rodriguez, Patterson, Williams called out. You're Team 4. Your checkpoint coordinates are here. He handed Sarah a map with locations marked in red ink. As she studied the coordinates, her blood ran cold. The checkpoints led deep into the forest, far from any backup or communication with the base. It was the perfect location for an ambush. Jake noticed her expression immediately. Over the past 2 days, he had become expert at reading her subtle signals, the tiny changes in posture and expression that indicated danger. What's wrong? He asked quietly as they gathered their gear. This isn't a training exercise, Sarah replied, her voice barely above a whisper. This is a trap. What do you mean? Sarah showed him the map. These coordinates take us to an area with no radio coverage, no backup, and multiple escape routes for anyone who wants to disappear. Someone knows who I really am. Jake felt fear creep up his spine. Williams? Maybe. Or someone else who's been watching us. As the teams prepared to leave for the exercise, Sarah made rapid mental calculations. She was outnumbered. In unfamiliar territory, with civilian recruits who had no idea what they were walking into. Her training told her to abort the mission, call for backup, and extract safely. But her father's killer was here, probably watching, possibly planning to eliminate the threat she represented. This might be her only chance to identify the traitor and complete her mission. Listen to me carefully, she told Jake as they gathered their equipment. When we get to the forest, stay close and do exactly what I say. Don't question anything, don't hesitate, and be ready to run if I tell you to. Sarah, maybe we should tell someone what's happening. Who? We don't know who we can trust. The teams loaded into trucks for transport to the starting point. Sarah noticed that their truck driver was someone she didn't recognize. Not one of the regular base personnel. Another warning sign. During the ride, she discreetly checked her equipment. She had managed to acquire certain non-standard items over the past few weeks, things that weren't part of normal recruit gear but might be essential for survival. A combat knife concealed in her boot, a small communication device hidden in her uniform, and a few other tools that would be crucial if this night turned violent. The trucks stopped at the edge of a vast forest preserve. The area was completely dark except for their headlights, with no signs of civilization in any direction. Commander Williams briefed all the teams together, explaining the navigation course and safety procedures. Each team will follow their assigned route to reach the final checkpoint, he announced. The exercise should take approximately 4 hours. Any team that becomes lost or encounters problems should use their emergency radios to call for assistance. Sarah checked her radio immediately. It was dead. She looked at Jake and shook her head slightly. He checked his own radio and found the same problem. Our communications are down, Jake whispered. Not an accident, Sarah replied. As the teams dispersed into the forest, Sarah noticed that theirs was the only group heading in their particular direction. The other teams were all sent toward areas much closer to the main road. They were being isolated deliberately. The forest was pitch black except for their flashlights. The terrain was rough, with thick underbrush, fallen logs, and steep ravines that made movement difficult and dangerous. Sarah led the way, using skills far beyond anything taught in basic navigation courses. After an hour of hiking, they reached their first checkpoint. It was marked with reflective tape attached to a tree, exactly as described in their instructions. But Sarah noticed something that made her stop immediately. The tape was fresh. Too fresh. It had been placed recently, probably within the last few hours, not set up in advance like legitimate training markers would be. Wait, she told the team, holding up her hand. She moved carefully around the checkpoint area, looking for signs of disturbance. What she found confirmed her worst fears. Boot prints in the soft earth. Too many for a single person setting up training markers. Multiple people had been here recently, and they had taken positions around the checkpoint as if preparing for an ambush. We need to leave. Now, Sarah said urgently. What about the checkpoint? Rodriguez asked. Don't we need to document that we were here? Oh, this isn't about training anymore, Sarah replied. Someone is hunting us. As if summoned by her words, the forest around them exploded into action. Bright tactical lights blazed from multiple positions, blinding the recruits and destroying their night vision. Armed figures in black tactical gear emerged from concealment, moving with professional coordination. Down! Everyone down! Shouted a voice from the darkness. Sarah reacted instantly. Years of combat training overriding conscious thought. Instead of dropping to the ground like a compliant recruit, she dove toward cover behind a fallen log, simultaneously drawing the combat knife from her boot. Jake, confused and terrified, started to follow the shouted commands. Sarah grabbed his arm and pulled him down beside her. Those aren't military, she whispered urgently. Look at their gear, their movements. This is a private military team. The attackers were closing in, calling out commands and coordinating their approach with hand signals. Sarah counted at least 6 of them. all armed with military-grade weapons and equipped with night vision goggles. Professional soldiers, not base personnel. Rodriguez and Patterson, terrified and disoriented, raised their hands in surrender. The attackers immediately secured them with zip ties and forced them to their knees. "Where's the woman?" called out what appeared to be the team leader. "Chen, we know you're here." Sarah realized that this entire operation was specifically designed to capture or kill her. Someone had discovered her investigation and decided to eliminate the threat permanently. "Sarah Chen," the leader called out again. "Naval Intelligence. We know who you are." Sarah's mind raced through tactical options. She was outnumbered 6-1. In unfamiliar territory, with no backup and no communications. The logical choice was surrender, hoping that her captors wanted information rather than immediate elimination. But these weren't regular military personnel, and their equipment suggested resources beyond anything available to typical security leaks. This was a sophisticated operation, which meant her investigation had uncovered something much larger than a single traitor. "Jake," she whispered, "can you make it to that ravine behind us?" Jake looked back and saw the steep drop-off about 20 yards away. "Maybe." "Why?" "When I give the signal, run for it. Follow the ravine back toward the road and get help." "What about you?" "I'm going to buy you time." Before Jake could protest, Sarah made her move. She threw her flashlight as far as possible in one direction while moving quickly in the opposite direction. The ruse worked for about 3 seconds, drawing fire away from her position and allowing her to close distance on the nearest attacker. Her SEAL training took over completely. Sarah moved through the forest like a predator, using every piece of cover and every shadow to her advantage. The first attacker never saw her coming. She disabled him silently with techniques learned in classified training programs, acquiring his weapon and night vision equipment. Now the odds were slightly better, but she was still vastly outnumbered. The remaining attackers regrouped quickly, showing the kind of tactical discipline that confirmed her suspicions about their professional training. They formed a search pattern designed to flush her out of cover while maintaining their own security. Sarah used the acquired night vision to study their positions and movement patterns. What she saw made her realize the true scope of the conspiracy she had stumbled into. These weren't just private soldiers hired for a single operation. Their equipment included communications gear connected to external command structures, tactical computers with detailed intelligence files, and weapons that were restricted to special operations units. This was a full-scale intelligence operation, not a simple cover-up. Her investigation had uncovered something much bigger than her father's murder. She was looking at evidence of a systematic compromise of naval special warfare operations, probably involving significant enemy intelligence services. The leader of the attacking team was receiving instructions through his communication system. Sarah managed to get close enough to hear fragments of the conversation. "Target confirmed. Intelligence operative. Eliminate and sanitize. Make it look like training accident." She realized that her death was meant to appear accidental, just like her father's. The same people who had killed him were now trying to complete their cover-up by eliminating his daughter. Sarah made a decision that would define the rest of her life. Instead of continuing to evade capture, she would go on the offensive. She would use every skill she possessed to not just survive, but to defeat this entire operation and expose the conspiracy that had cost her father his life. Moving with deadly precision, Sarah began systematically eliminating the attackers. Her SEAL training had prepared her for exactly this type of situation. Outnumbered, outgunned, but fighting for something more important than her own survival. The forest became a deadly game of cat and mouse, with Sarah using superior training and motivation to overcome numerical disadvantage. Each engagement was quick and decisive, using tactics designed to minimize her exposure while maximizing damage to enemy capabilities. When Commander Williams arrived at the scene 30 minutes later with a rescue team, he found Sarah standing over the last attacker, her uniform torn and muddy but her expression coldly professional. "Lieutenant Chen," Williams said, and his use of her real rank told her everything she needed to know. "Commander Williams," she replied, "I think we need to talk." Jake emerged from his hiding place in the ravine, staring at Sarah with a mixture of awe and fear. The woman he had trained with for weeks had just single-handedly defeated a team of professional soldiers. "Are you okay?" he asked. Sarah nodded, but her attention was focused on Williams. "How did you know where to find us?" Williams gestured to the tactical radio he carried. "We've been monitoring communications. Your emergency beacon activated automatically when the attack began." Sarah frowned. She hadn't activated any emergency beacon, and her equipment had been checked for tracking devices. Williams' explanation didn't make sense. "Sir," she said carefully, "I need to report that this was not a random attack. These individuals had specific intelligence about my identity and mission." Williams nodded grimly. "I know. We've been tracking this conspiracy for months, waiting for them to make exactly this kind of mistake." "Sir." "Lieutenant Chen, meet Rear Admiral Thompson, Naval Intelligence Command." An older officer stepped out of the shadows, his uniform indicating senior rank and intelligence specialization. "Lieutenant Chen," Admiral Thompson said, "your father would be proud. You've just helped us expose the largest intelligence breach in naval special warfare history." Sarah stared at him in confusion. "I don't understand, sir. Your investigation was authorized from the beginning, but it was also being used as bait. We needed the real conspirators to reveal themselves by trying to eliminate you. My father? Your father discovered evidence of this same conspiracy. His death wasn't an accident, but it also wasn't a failure of security. He was working with us, and his sacrifice provided the intelligence we needed to set this trap." Jake watched this exchange with growing amazement. "So Sarah's mission was real," Admiral Thompson confirmed, "but it was also part of a larger operation to expose a network of compromised personnel and hostile intelligence operatives." Sarah looked around at the captured attackers, the evidence of conspiracy, and the senior officers who had known more about her mission than she had realized. "The security leak was identified months ago. We've been building a case to expose the entire network. Your investigation provided the final pieces we needed." 1. Williams stepped forward. "Lieutenant Chen, your cover is officially blown, but your mission is complete. You've served with distinction and honor." Sarah felt the weight of months of deception and danger lifting from her shoulders. Her father's death had been avenged, the conspiracy exposed, and the threat to naval special warfare eliminated. Jake looked at her with new understanding. "So what happens now?" Sarah smiled for the first time since arriving at the training facility. "Now I go back to being a Navy SEAL. And you finish basic training and decide what kind of sailor you want to become. Will I see you again?" Sarah's expression grew serious. "Jake, what you witnessed here, what you learned about this operation, it's all classified. You saved my life tonight by trusting me and following my lead. That makes you someone I'll always be grateful to. But it also makes you someone who knows too much." Admiral Thompson stepped forward. "Recruit Morrison, you'll be transferred to Naval Intelligence Training immediately. Consider it a promotion." Jake stared at him in shock. "Sir? Your performance during this operation shows exactly the kind of judgment and courage we need in intelligence work. If you're interested." Sarah nodded approvingly. "You'll do well, Morrison. Just remember, in this business, things are never quite what they seem." 7. As rescue teams secured the area and processed the captured operatives, Sarah Chen stood in the forest where she had finally completed the mission that started with her father's death. She had proven herself not just as a Navy SEAL, but as someone worthy of carrying on David Chen's legacy of service and sacrifice. The trap had been meant for her, but instead, it had caught the people responsible for her father's murder and the compromise of countless military operations. Justice had been served, and the Navy's most elite units could continue their mission knowing that their security had been restored. Jake Morrison looked at Sarah Chen, Lieutenant Chen, Navy SEAL, Naval Intelligence Operative, and realized that his initial attempts to trap her had led him into a world he never could have imagined. A world where dedication, skill, and courage could overcome any odds. The real story was just beginning for both of them.